Well, hello, my name is Daniel Bennett. Welcome to Relationship University. Today the topic is going to be how to apologize. But before I get to that, I have a few announcements for you about Relationship University. So first of all, if this is your first time watching a Relationship U, the goal of these is to give biblical principles and talk about God's way of having relationships. And it can be a wide variety of situations. It can be in the workplace, it can be at home, and dating, and marriage, and parenting. It can be all kinds of things. We have a variety of teachers who will be teaching on a variety of topics. Like I said today, how to apologize will kind of be relevant to many types of relationships. And also, we have archives of many, we've been doing this for a while, of many relationship universities from the past. And so to find the full archive list, you can go to awmi.net/relationship. So you can go there to find a whole bunch. They're free. There's a whole bunch listed. You can find, different instructors or different topics that you're interested in there. Also, we do have this product that we finished a while back. And so this is 56 hours. So this is more strategic, curriculum moving through certain topics, from, dating and relationships early on to marriage, to grandparenting, to parenting, to all kinds of things like that. And so this is 56 hours of content. It also has some testimonies in there and some other little extras. Comes with a textbook outline of what's being taught in the 56 different lessons. There's about 5 or 6 different instructors, I believe, maybe a bit more, and some Q&A sessions and things like that as well. If you're interested in that, you can call 719-635-1111. That's also a number you can call if you'd like prayer. That's open 24/7, so that's our prayer line as well. And so feel free to call that number if you're interested in contacting us about product, or if you'd like prayer or agreement or anything like that. Now, the format of Relationship University, today I'll be sharing for about 45 minutes. We'll see how that goes. And it'll just be teaching. So once the school year begins again in late August, we'll start having these live again. And that's when we'll start having live Q&A where you can send in and text in your questions. For this one we can't because we're pre-recording it. And so there's no audience right here in the building. So today, I am your instructor. And as I said, today the topic is how to apologize. And this is a really exciting topic to me. It was kind of difficult to put together at the same time because I've never had to apologize, so this is all theory in my life. I'm just kidding. But anyway, this is a topic that comes up all the time in life, and it's something that doesn't get discussed very much. Now, when I say how to apologize, I'm not talking about forgiveness. And I'll touch on this a little bit more later, but forgiveness is a totally separate topic. This is not about how to be forgiven by God, right? That's a free gift by grace. Jesus has already paid for it. I'm not talking about that. Forgiveness and freedom from unforgiveness, those are much bigger topics and much more important. But how to apologize is a skill that I've noticed many people don't have. And it's something that I've improved in over the years. And as you improve in it, you start to notice that it's a lost art form, really. One of my favorite movies is Anne of Green Gables, and part of the storyline in that is that she becomes really good at these huge, theatrical apologies because she's always, putting her foot in her mouth or things like that. And so, I want to talk about kind of how to apologize in the relationship between people, not in our relationship between us and God. That's a different topic. So this is about relationships, and like I said earlier, this can be in a wide variety of relationships. There can, you might have to apologize at work sometimes, right? Maybe to a boss, to a coworker, to a customer. Maybe apologizing in your family, to a spouse, to a parent, to a sibling, to a child, right? Some parents think that I can never apologize. I have to make them think I'm perfect at everything. No, it's powerful and important to apologize. If a parent messes up, to demonstrate to a child, this is what a good apology looks like. This is how I'll apologize even to a child or in a different situation. Sometimes we need to apologize to friends. Maybe we're part of a team and we need to apologize to a team. Maybe we're leading a group and we need to apologize in that context. Maybe it's apologizing to a complete stranger, right? So maybe it's not that you broke a relationship, but maybe it's just something where it's like, no, I need to apologize to this person that I don't know, but for something that happened. Right? Sometimes we're apologizing to people older than us, people younger than us. Maybe they're the same age. Maybe it's, they're in a higher status than us. And I don't mean, as human beings in God's eyes. I mean, like in the context, right? So maybe their role is a higher up role. Maybe they're the leader of whatever you're part of or something like that. And so maybe they're in a higher status than you, maybe you're in a higher status. And so you're apologizing and you're the one in charge or the one that should be honored more in that context, right? Especially in different cultures. You could have things like that. Or maybe they're equal status. There's just a wide range of types of situations that come up, and apologizing is something that is needed in day-to-day life. I mean, it comes up frequently, and it's something that if we're strong in, it can help preserve a lot of relationships. What's amazing about apologizing is how many people are just absolutely terrible at it. And I do want to give a warning. As I teach on how to apologize, it's going to be really easy to think of all the times someone's apologized to you and they've been terrible at it. And so try not to use this just as a reason to get more offended at people who don't know how to apologize. I'd like to focus on how we can apologize better and just be gracious toward those who apologize and aren't good at it. So, a lot of relationships crash and burn because people don't know how to apologize. Or little things that could have stayed really little fester and fester and fester and fester. They just get worse and worse and worse until the relationship falls apart, or there's just long-term resentment, things like that. So how can we be better at apologizing? Again, still in the intro here, but it's also very easy in our culture to become cynical about apologies. In the news, right, you'll see politicians or celebrities or other people giving apologies, and it's easy to become cynical because, you can tell that it was written by a lawyer, or you can tell it was written by their PR manager, things like that. It's not sincere. They're just basically saying, I'm sorry I got caught. What do I need to say for you to leave me alone? And so it's easy to have a cynical view on apologies because so many of them are just fluffy, or people are afraid of getting sued, so they have to apologize in a way where they're not actually taking responsibility for anything. So, last thing to wrap up this intro is that this topic does require humility, because I'm not talking about how to make other people apologize to you. I'm talking about how we can apologize. So the implication is someday in the future you might mess up. Someday in the future you might do something you shouldn't have done, and you might need to apologize. So this is something that, if we're realistic, we can say, yeah, I imagine at some point I'll make a mistake, I'll make a poor choice, I'll get caught up in the moment, I'll do something to hurt somebody, I'll need to apologize. And so this is kind of a preemptive thing. Now maybe there's something in your life right now that you already need to apologize for, and I can help equip you. But for the most part, this will be equipping you for the future. But this is important. Even Jesus in Matthew 5, verses 23 and 24, he's talking about this. He's saying, therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gifts, right? He's talking about restoring relationships, apologizing. They have something against you, let's go and make peace, and then let's move on. So what I have for you are 7 steps, and some are tips, some are steps. 7 steps to a good apology. And that's not super complicated, so 11 steps. Don't be concerned by the number 11. This isn't super intense or complex, but I just want to really break it down. And before I get started on the 11 steps, every situation is different. In some situations, maybe some of these steps should be skipped. But at the very least, it's not bad to have this kind of stuff in mind so that if you skip one, there's a really good reason for it. So number 1, let me come back over here. So number 1 is an apology needed? So the first step is even just to identify, do you even need an apology? Some situations don't require an apology. So before we can determine is one needed or not, we need to figure out, what's the purpose of an apology in the first place? And like I said, apologies and forgiveness are totally separate things. They're not the same thing. So an apology is not how we get forgiveness from God, and an apology is not how we get forgiveness from the other person, right? God has offered us forgiveness right off the bat. That's a done deal. We can receive that from Jesus. So an apology is not, well, if I don't apologize, God won't forgive me, right? So different topic, but I hope that's review and that you already know that. An apology is not how the other person forgives us, right? We don't have to apologize and they can still forgive us. Or even if we do apologize, maybe they won't forgive us. The apology and the forgiveness are totally separate. Again, if somebody does something against us, we should forgive them immediately. And that's something that God's grace has equipped us to do. We have God's forgiveness inside of us. But the apology is more related to the relationship between us. It's not about our relationship with God. It's about our relationship with the other person. We can't control if someone forgives us or not, but we can control if we apologize. So it's about that relationship. So part of the purpose of an apology is to honor the other person, right? We're honoring them by acknowledging that something that we did had a negative impact on them, and that we regret the decision and wish we could make a different decision. We're taking responsibility going forward. I heard a quote by Benjamin Franklin that says, apologies are not about the past, they're about the future. At least I think that one was from Benjamin Franklin. So a secondary goal of an apology is to reset or restore the relationship. Reset or restore the relationship, get things back to normal, possibly. Now I say that's secondary because that's not always possible. For example, if you are apologizing to a total stranger, an apology is still a great thing even though there's no relationship, right? So I don't want to give the impression that if you don't know that person, you'll never see them again, who cares? If it's a customer or you're the customer or it's just somebody down the street, something happens and then apology is warranted. It's not like I don't need to apologize because there's no relationship, so I don't need to restore the relationship. So that's a secondary one because in some situations that's the goal. In other situations it's not. You still can honor somebody even if you don't know them. So the reason why I say restore the relationship or reset the relationship is because sometimes you can actually restore it. Things go back to normal, right? If there's a good apology, things are back to normal, things are restored. Sometimes it can actually make the relationship stronger. Many of the best relationships are the ones that have gone through things and you come out stronger because you know each other better, you've humbled yourself, there's been that forgiveness and there's increased trust because it's like, hey, now I know that we won't give up on this relationship. And so sometimes it's not just restoration, sometimes it's actually strengthening the relationship if there's a strong apology. But sometimes it's resetting it. And what I mean by that is it's being reset at a different level, right? So maybe it's, because of this thing that happened, I'm apologizing. My goal is to reset this wherever you'd like to reset it. Maybe the trust won't be there. Maybe you were best friends and now you're just going back to being friendly acquaintances. Maybe you worked for somebody and it's like, okay, the relationship's restored, but you still can't work here anymore, right? So resetting it is saying, okay, I understand that the situation is going to be different going forward, but I at least want a clean slate. Let's just reset it to where there's no offense, there's no anger, frustration, things like that. However, there are new boundaries, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. And by the way, apologizing is not a sign of weakness. It actually takes courage to apologize. We're putting ourselves out there. We're humbling ourselves to somebody else. People who never apologize, that's not strength, that's weakness. If somebody never apologizes, they're saying, whatever happened, my pride is too delicate for me to fight for this relationship. My pride is too sensitive. It'll get too easily hurt. And so I just have to let this relationship crash and burn because of my pride. That's just a sign of weakness. So if we understand the purpose, right? The purpose is to honor somebody by acknowledging that we made a choice that had a negative impact on them, a choice that we shouldn't have made. And we know that the goal is possibly to restore or reset the relationship. Then it becomes much more simple to figure out, is an apology needed in the first place, right? So the first question is, have you done something that negatively impacted someone else? I'd say something you shouldn't have done, because sometimes you might have to make a tough call where there's a negative impact on somebody, but you still needed to make that call. It's still the right thing to do, but it just, not everybody was blessed by it. That may happen. So this is more something that you shouldn't have done, that, or something you did with the wrong motives that had a negative impact on somebody. There's a joke. I heard someone say, so the joke goes, sometimes I'm sorry and I apologize can be used interchangeably. Sometimes they mean the same thing, but not at a funeral, right? And to me, I actually, when I first heard that joke, I was like, no, I am sorry and I apologize don't mean the same thing. That doesn't make any sense. But again, if you're at a funeral and you say, I apologize, it has totally different meaning. And so really, I'm sorry and I apologize don't ever mean the same thing. I'm sorry is about how you feel. I apologize is a decision that you're making. It's completely separate things. It's a decision you're making to acknowledge something that you've done. I'm sorry, I don't know if you've ever met somebody where they have something bad happen. They get fired from their job and you say, I'm so sorry to hear that. And they say, don't be sorry, it's not your fault. And it's like, I didn't say I apologize. I didn't cause that to happen. I'm just saying I'm sorry for you. I just feel empathy. I feel compassion for you. So again, I'm sorry and I apologize mean totally different things. They can go hand in hand, but they don't have to. So the first one, is an apology needed? Did you do anything to cause something negative to happen to them that you need to apologize for? And number two is, will an apology bless them? So I'm sure you've had this happen. Maybe you've done this. You've probably had this happen to you, where someone apologizes to you about something that you didn't even know, and you're like, this didn't bless me at all, right? You're just insulting. I mean, sometimes people even use it as an insult. But are you doing this for you or for them when you apologize? Is this going to bless them and help them move on and get closure, or is this just you airing your dirty laundry and like it's about me and my personal realization, and I don't care how it affects you, I just need to apologize. Here's my baggage, I'm giving it to you now, right? Also, is it appropriate? So for example, if you mugged somebody, right? Say you were in crime decades ago. Say you mugged somebody 20 years ago. It wouldn't bless that person if you find them on Facebook 20 years later and say, I'm so sorry, I'm the person who mugged you. Right? No, just repent, deal with that with God. It won't bless them to stir that back up, something where you hurt somebody or something like that in that kind of context. Sometimes here at school, happens once or twice, or once a year, every other year, something like that. A student might come to me and say, by the way, I didn't like you for a long time, and I used to say really bad things about you. I apologize. And it's like, I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't know you, right? You don't need to apologize. All you're telling me is something I didn't even know about. So, again, they might say, I feel really bad, so I need to apologize. And it's like, well, maybe you just need to repent, right? Just sort out and say, talk about that with God. You don't need to necessarily go to the person if they didn't even know about it, right? Where it's like, I could have possibly been like, well, now I'm offended that I know that for years you were saying bad things about me, when I didn't even know about that, right? So again, the question is, will it bless the other person? And if not, maybe we shouldn't do this. Another thing is, will this bless them? Is this the right timing, right? Maybe there's an apology that should happen, but is this the right time for it, right? Maybe they're still angry or hurt. And so maybe they're not ready to have a conversation with you. And so forcing them to talk to you might not bless them. Maybe they're stressed out. And so now's not the time to talk about this. Maybe they're just really busy. Or maybe they're with other people, right? Maybe they're with their family or with coworkers or friends. And if you just interrupt and try to give this big apology in front of everybody, that might have a negative effect where, again, you're apologizing, which should be blessing them, honoring them, and instead you're being self-centered about it, where you're making it about you and you're humiliating them. And so, again, those first two, is an apology needed and will it bless them? Kind of the same thing. Those are kind of pre-apology. So now I want to get into the specifics of how to apologize well. Again, if they don't feel dishonored, if they don't know about it, if it's something they don't care about, an apology might not be needed. Even if you are like, well, in my heart, I know I made the bad choice, it may still be something between you and God that you don't have to talk to them about. Each one of these I feel like we could talk about for an hour, so I kind of got to move along. So now let's talk about how to give a good apology. Step number 3 is be sincere. Be sincere. See, a good apology is not just something you do in the moment, it's something that you think about in advance. It's something that you reflect on. And it's something that's settled in your heart because it needs to come from a place of genuineness. If it's not sincere, it's just saying words, right? And so, I don't know if your parents ever did this for you, but many times parents, they'll force their children to apologize, right? Say you're sorry for hitting them. Okay, say I forgive you. And that's okay because parents are basically trying to teach them the principle. But in reality, that's not a real apology. If somebody's forcing you to do it, it's not a real apology. If you don't want to do it, right? If you say, I'm sorry, and you can tell on their face that they don't mean it one bit, that's not a real apology. Again, for children, you're trying to teach them so that they remember this, so down the road they have the skill set. But in reality, if you apologize for something and you don't mean it, that's just manipulation. That's just telling somebody something you think they want to hear, but nothing's actually changed. That's not a real apology. It doesn't honor the other person if you're lying. If you're trying to restore the relationship and you're trying to restore it on lies, that's not a real apology. So again, it needs to be sincere. And it's really not about feeling, but when I say be sincere, I don't mean that you need to feel really, really, really bad. Right? Sometimes people think like a good apology, like if you're not crying, it doesn't count. If you don't feel horrible, it doesn't count. It's not about your emotions at all. Like you may or may not have emotions about that. That's not the point. Apologies are actually much more logical. They're more of a decision, not an emotion, right? Because basically what you're saying is, I was wrong, I shouldn't have done that, I wish I hadn't done that. If I could go back in time, I would have done something different. I would tell myself not to do that, right? I don't want to make decisions like that in the future. I'm not saying you have to say exactly all this. This is the heart behind it, though. Is I did something that negatively affected you. I shouldn't have done it. I wish I hadn't done it, and I hope I never do that again. I'm going to make decisions on the inside that will affect my actions on the outside because I want to make sure I never hurt you like that again. So again, feeling bad is not sincere. People feel bad all the time, and they keep doing it. So that's not sincere. Sincere is when you're determined, saying, I will do whatever I can to make sure that whatever caused me to make that decision, I change so that I never do that again. So again, feeling bad is not sincerity. Someone can be weeping, gnashing their teeth, rolling around, all these kinds of things, and they feel sincere. That's not sincere. Sincere is, and I'm going to do something about it. I want to make sure this never happens again. We'll talk about that more here in a little bit. So number 3 is be sincere. Step number 4 is, and this is a big one, apologize for what you should have done differently. Apologize for what you should have done differently. This is where many apologies go wrong. So people try to apologize, and then they walk up and say, I'm so sorry that you misunderstood me. Right? I'm so sorry that you got offended. I'm so sorry that it bothered you. I'm so sorry that you felt uncomfortable. And it sounds like you're right. I'm so sorry. I apologize that you're an idiot is basically what you're saying. That's not a real apology. That's an accusation. So just because you use the words I'm sorry or I apologize does not mean you're actually apologizing. A true apology is when you're taking ownership of something that you did, right? So it's I shouldn't have done this and I did. I apologize for that. It's not just again, so many times people start off an apology and say, I'm so sorry I did that, and I'm so sorry that you're just so sensitive that you just get offended at everything that I do, and I'm so sorry that you're the problem, and I'm so sorry that you took it the wrong way, and I'm so sorry that you made me angry. I'm so sorry that you made me blow up. So, all kinds of stuff like that. It's not an apology if you're accusing the other person. Or it's not an apology to just push the blame somewhere else, right? People say things like, I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry that we keep fighting. Right? Just very passive. I didn't take ownership. I'm just sorry that we keep fighting. I'm sorry that people keep making me angry. I'm sorry that I was raised that way. I'm sorry that that's how my parents taught me to do things. I'm sorry that that's, again, that's basically, you're not apologizing. You're saying, I'm sorry, but I'm the victim. I'm so sorry that we're both in this together and that I'm the victim and you're the victim and it's not my fault. An apology is saying, I made a bad choice. I made a decision that I knew better or I should have known better. You apologize for something that was in your control, not something that wasn't in your control. And so again, a lot of apologies are just fluff when people say, I apologize that you, that phrase right there, that you. You'll start hearing it a lot if you haven't already noticed that in relationships or any other setting. I'm so sorry that you did something. Or just, I'm so sorry that something happened, right? Something that shouldn't have happened. I'm so sorry that I'm sorry that, that they pushed my buttons. I'm so sorry that I was in a bad mood. Apologize for something that you should have done differently. Taking ownership of it, right? It's acknowledging that a decision that you made shouldn't have been made. Right? Something that you said, something that you didn't say, something that you did, something that you didn't do. Right? Maybe you knew better, but even if you didn't, maybe you should have known better. Right? Maybe I didn't know better at the time, but if I truly cared, I would have known better. I would have taken it more seriously. So again, I'm not talking about freak accidents. I'm not saying apologizing for I shouldn't have bought that chair. If I hadn't bought that chair, you wouldn't have tripped on it. Right? No, you don't have to apologize, right? Buying a chair wasn't something evil. It wasn't something that you did selfishly. It wasn't something that you did, without considering the other person. So I'm not talking about freak accidents, things like that. I'm talking about things where it's in the moment, you made a decision that you knew would have a negative impact and you did it anyway. Now, it can be more nuanced. So, for example, if you forget about something, if somebody says, don't forget this, or hey, we need to do this in 3 days, or this is really, important to me, so make sure that we get this done. If you forget about it, right, how can that be your fault? Do you apologize for something that you forgot about? Yes. See, it's not that you forgot. People forget things all the time. But it's that if it were important to you, you would have made sure that you were reminded. right? So again, it's not that you forgot, because you can't control if you forgot. You can control if you don't remember it. If that makes sense, right? People forget things all the time, but if something's important to you, you'll make sure that you remember. You'll find ways to set reminders. You'll find ways to keep it in front of you, right? If it's a big deal to you, you'll think about it more. You'll put sticky notes places. You'll make notes. You'll set reminders, things like that. So it's not that you can't apologize for intentionally forgetting, right? It's apologizing for not treating it as something important, because if you had treated it as something important, you wouldn't have forgotten, or if you'd forgotten, you would have remembered, all right? This happens a lot in relationships. And again, and it can be at work and all that. So the example that came to mind, though, was in a marriage relationship, right? Typically, you'll see husbands say something like, I forgot, what's the big deal? It was an accident. And then typically you might see the wives say, you wouldn't have forgotten if this was important to you. Husband's like, but it was an accident. There's nothing I could have done about it. And it's like, well, forgetting was an accident. Not caring enough to create reminders wasn't an accident. And so, again, a good apology for forgetting something wouldn't be, I'm sorry that I forgot. I mean, for small things, that's fine. But for something more meaningful, instead of saying, I'm sorry that I forgot, because now you're basically saying, like, I'm sorry, it's my brain's fault. It wasn't my fault, it was my brain's fault. Instead of saying that, it could actually be better to say something like, I'm sorry, I knew that was important to you, and I didn't make it important enough to me, and I should have set reminders. I should have taken it more seriously because I knew it was important to you. I'm sorry. Because that's the decision that you made that you shouldn't have made. You didn't make a decision to forget. You made a decision to not care enough to make sure you didn't forget. So, again, it's about taking ownership. I did this and I shouldn't have done this. Or I could have done this and I didn't. Not blame shifting, not accusing them. So again, taking ownership of something that you did. So step number 5, and a good apology is be specific. Be specific. Don't be vague. You see this all the time. It's in romance songs. It's in all kinds of stuff. People say things like, I'm sorry for everything. It's all my fault. Right? There's even a song, you can blame it all on me. And people are like, man, that's really taking ownership. I just said it's all my fault. First of all, it's ridiculous. Very rarely is something all one person's fault. But it's also just really, really lazy. Right? So basically you're saying, I feel bad about everything, but I'm too lazy to figure out what exactly I did. Right? It's all my fault. Blame me for everything. And it's like, if you really cared, you would take the time to figure out what it was that you did that hurt the other person. Because it's so easy just to say, blame me. It's my fault. I'm just sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, all right? Let's stop talking about it. I'm sorry. It's like, well, no, my goal is not for you to feel bad. We're trying to restore the relationship. And so to restore the relationship, I need to know, do you know what it was that you did? Again, this happens a lot. People say, I'll change everything, but won't take the time to figure out what that means. So again, people can be very lazy with this, be very vague, and they think that it's a sign of sincerity. Like, look how horrible I feel. Look how miserable I am. It's like, that's not the goal. A good apology is not just feeling bad. A good apology is acknowledging what you did wrong. And to know what you did wrong, you need to understand. You need to spend time thinking about it. Like I said, to be sincere, we need to have had some self-reflection in advance. We need to have thought about what it was and acknowledge what it was that we did. A good apology comes after self-reflection, right? An apology is just communicating something that you've already decided on the inside. So the deciding on the inside part should happen first, and then you're communicating to the other person, this is what I acknowledge that I made this poor choice, and I don't want to do that again, and I'm sorry that it hurt you, and I'm taking ownership for this. So we'll get more into that here in a minute. So again, be specific. So again, explain what decision you made, right? Apologize for what you should have done differently, and then be specific. Also, number 6, so now we're also getting into kind of tips to avoid pitfalls, is don't mention what they did wrong. So when you're apologizing, maybe it was their fault and your fault. Maybe you were both wrong. Maybe they handled it wrong and you handled it wrong. Don't focus on what they did wrong. You're apologizing for something that you did. So this is not a negotiation. This isn't like in a spy movie where they exchange hostages, right? I'll release my hostage if you release yours at the same time. I'll apologize if you apologize at the same time. This isn't a negotiation. Just I'm going to apologize for the part that I did, and I'm not even going to mention the part that you did. Right? So even if they're 90% wrong and you're only 10% wrong, focus on the 10%. Say, this is what I did wrong. I apologize for this. I should not have done this. And don't mention what they did. You're apologizing for you, Again, so many turn into arguments again because it's like, I'm sorry, but let's not forget that this wouldn't have even happened if you hadn't done this, and you should apologize. Where's my apology, right? So many times apologies can turn into new arguments because people are like, well, why didn't you apologize back to me? Or why do you only apologize to me for this? You also did that and that and the other. Don't fall into that trap. Don't mention what they did wrong. Just focus on what you're trying to do. Now's not the time. Again, there may be more context, there may be more conversations that need to happen, but keep your apology pure. Don't bring other things into it. Don't turn it into part accusation, part coaching, kind of like, hey, I think you should apologize, all this kind of stuff. Just apologize. Leave it at that. So even if they bring up what they did, resist opening that up again, right? You focus on you apologizing, and they might say, oh, I'm sorry too, blah, blah. Don't take the bait. I'm not saying that they're doing it intentionally. Don't take the bait of getting distracted. Like first kind of finish the apology, wrap it up, complete it, and then move on to other topics. Don't let it get murky. Don't let it get confusing and complex again by starting to bring up like, yeah, it was this and that and the other. It was also your fault. Or if they say like, I'm sorry too, just kind of like, okay, I get you're sorry too, but I want to make sure that you understand I apologize for this, and this is what I'm going to do about it. Also, in the same point, don't agree with them if they say it isn't your fault, right? If you apologize and they say it's not your fault, no apology needed, don't agree with them. Again, if you follow the previous steps, if you're being sincere, if you've thought about this and you said this is something I genuinely need to apologize for, the moment they say, no, you don't need to apologize, don't be like, whew, okay, good. No, stick to your guns. If you're being sincere and you've thought about this is a real thing, and you said, I made this decision I should not have made, and they say, don't worry about it, say, I'm glad it didn't bother you. Right? These are some examples of how you can react to that. I'm glad it didn't bother you, but I still need you to know that I made a bad decision, I apologize for it. And if they say, don't worry about it, I'm glad it didn't bother, I'm glad you're not worried about it, I just want to make sure that you understand, though, that I am apologizing. If they say, no, it wasn't your fault, say, no, but I did do this and I apologize for it. So again, don't let them let you off the hook. Because again, if you're being sincere, now again, if you're lying, if you're just pretending to apologize and they say no problem, you're like, oh good, because it wasn't my fault and I'm glad you passed the test. I didn't mean that apology. No, we should be sincere in the first place. And if we're sincere, then we should stick to it. Even if they start trying to say, no problem, don't worry about it, whatever else we say. No, don't dismiss this. I'm trying to restore the relationship, not sweep this under the rug. And that's a big thing. A lot of times people think that they forgive and they think that they apologize when actually they just kind of let it sit there. It's kind of like, I don't mind ignoring this. Let's just ignore this. You ignore it, I'll ignore it, let's just move on. That's not how strong relationships are built, right? If somebody blows up and does something terrible, or somebody is manipulative, or somebody is hurtful, and then it's kind of like, let's just never talk about this. That's a terrible relationship. On the surface, it might look great. It's kind of like, yeah, let's just move on. As long as we never bring it up, we'll never argue about that again. It just gets worse and worse and worse over time. The point of an apology is saying, we're good, right? I apologize whether they receive it or not. You're offering, you're extending the olive branch and saying, I acknowledge this, here's what I'm going to do about it. Where would you like things to land? You're kind of creating the opportunity for restoration or a reset. So if they encourage you to just ignore it, don't. Your mission's to apologize. Stick to your mission. So number 7 is don't make excuses. Don't include excuses in your apology. There might be all kinds of context where it's like, if you'd only known that this happened, and if you'd only known that that happened, and you'd only known about this and that and the other, if you knew how bad of a day I was having, if you knew what was happening here and that and the other, right? If you caused a negative impact on somebody else, right? It's like, yeah, but it was traffic's fault. And I'm so sorry that I did this, but it really is because my kids woke me up in the middle of the night, or it's really because of that, or it's really because of this. That person's fault or that person's fault. Don't do all that. Don't make excuses. Don't defend yourself. Don't explain more context. I'm not saying there's not more context. I'm saying the apology is not the time to talk about it. Keep your apology clean. Don't start bringing in other factors. Just say, I'm going to apologize for what I could have done differently. Right? If you're late to work and it's like, yeah, but there's traffic. Okay, but you could have left earlier. Right? And so again, I'm not saying there's never extenuating circumstances, but I'm just saying take ownership for, I was cutting it too close, I could have done this differently, I apologize. things like that. When I was in the military, this was a really big deal. They'd always say, no excuses in any way, especially in boot camp and things like that. And I had a difficult time with it for a little bit, philosophically, because they're saying, they might come up and scream at you and say, why'd you do this? What were you thinking? Blah, blah, blah. And you might be thinking, I didn't do that, right? That was that guy. When you all have shaved heads and you're all dressed identical, I'm sure that they can't really tell you apart very well. And so they might be screaming at the wrong person. And then if you try to defend yourself, they're like, no excuses. Don't explain, right? And to me, I didn't like that because basically I don't want the truth. I just want to yell at you. But then I realized it's actually bigger than that. And actually, I'm not talking about the military right now, but that's why they scream so loud, is so that so that everybody can hear it, right? The person who actually did it can hear it. Everybody else can hear it. So you're just kind of the focal point of they're screaming at you, but they're trying to teach everybody. So just kind of don't worry about defending yourself. That's not their goal. Their goal is not for you to feel bad. Their goal is for it to never happen again. And so, again, even if they're wrong, they don't care who did it. They care, I want to make sure that all of you realize it's unacceptable for this to happen, so you need to fix it next time you see it, even if you didn't do it, or things like that. And so, again, no excuses. You can still be honest and not make excuses. And so the way you do that is don't lie, don't apologize for something you didn't do, but apologize for what you could have done differently. And so no excuses is not the time to explain all the reasons why, everything was against you or didn't happen, right? If you're late for something and somebody waits 10 minutes for you, I'm so sorry that I was late. Or you can leave it at that. Now again, depending on the relationship, you might be like, my goodness, traffic was crazy, stuff like that. I'm talking about more about like big deal apologies. So number 8 is acknowledge the negative impact that your actions had on the other person. Right? So you might start off by saying, being specific and saying, I apologize for this decision that I made. You don't just say that, but then you acknowledge how it affected them. So then you might say, I know that it made you late for that special event. I know that what I did disrespected you. I know that what I did cost the business $2,000. Whatever it may be, and the key to this one really is usually listening. Usually they've been trying to explain to you the negative effect it had on them. And sometimes that's where the argument happens is you don't believe them. Who cares if you're late? I don't care, Just because something's not a big deal to you, though, it's not about if it's a big deal to you. Is it a big deal to them? Right? And so you're apologizing and saying, so instead of saying, I'm sorry that I did this and you missed 10 minutes of the movie, but the movie's not a big deal and it really shouldn't bother you. That's not a good apology because you're taking ownership and then you're accusing them of being too sensitive. A good one, again, you might say it's not a big deal, but it is to them. So you say, I apologize for this decision, and I understand that it caused you to miss something that was really important to you. Things like that. So you're acknowledging the effect that it had on them. And again, this is crucial because people need to know that you understand that the impact of what you did. So it's about what you did and the impact it had on them. And so the way you're honoring them is by saying, I understand, right? And if you misunderstand that part, then have more conversations. If they say, no, it's not about that, it's about this. Okay, now I understand. And repeat back to them, it's because of this. This is what I did, and this is how it had a negative effect on you. Number 9 is make it right. So I'll break this down a little bit. Sometimes you can make things right perfectly. Sometimes you can't, and I'll explain this a little bit. But it's so easy to say, I take full responsibility. It's just words. But what does that actually mean, right? There's some famous politicians, right, who just say, I take full responsibility for my actions. Okay, what are you going to do about that? What does that mean? Nothing. It just means that I said it, and each time you say, well, you shouldn't have done that, I take full responsibility. Okay, but what does that mean, right? The intent should be to make things right as much as possible. So some things can be fixed, right? If you borrowed money, you can give it back. If you broke something, you can pay for it. If you lied to someone, you can tell the truth. Things like that. And now this isn't penance. Again, like I said, this has nothing to do with forgiveness. So it's not about I have to do all these things for God to forgive me, right? God's already forgiven you. So I'm not talking about penance. I'm talking about restoring a relationship, or at least doing our best to make things right because we're being sincere. I shouldn't have done this. Here's the consequences. I made that choice. I'm going to try and undo those consequences as much as I can. So again, it's about the relationship with the other person, not about our relationship with God. If it can be made right, that's great, but sometimes it can't be undone. And in some cases, it can be, I can't make it right, but here's how I'll make sure it doesn't happen again in the future, right? In the workplace. Maybe I apologize for this. I understand that it affected things like this. Here's the steps I'm going to take to make sure that doesn't happen again. And usually that's fantastic because, you say if you're a boss and somebody messes up, it's like, I don't want you to feel bad. I don't want that to happen again, right? And so again, you're showing somebody, here's what I'm going to change. If you're in a relationship and somebody, did something that really hurt you, right? It's like, there should be some level of regret, right? I wish I hadn't done that. I'm not talking about like just guilt or condemnation. I'm just talking about, I wish I had made a different decision. But it's okay, wishing you hadn't done that is great, but what are you going to do about it not having that happen again? Right? I hope that makes sense. I don't just want you to feel sorry. I want to know that you're taking this seriously and you're going to try and prevent this from happening in the future. Sometimes, if it's much more serious, it might, making it right might just mean accepting the consequences, accepting justice in a sense. Maybe just because they forgive you doesn't mean that what you did wasn't wrong. That's a big part of forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean, if you forgive somebody, you're not telling them what you did wasn't wrong. What we're saying is what you did was wrong and I forgive you. Right? There's a debt and I'm washing it away. Because of Jesus, I'm able to forgive you. Just because they accept your apology does not mean that they want the relationship to go back to normal. That's part of taking ownership, part of taking responsibility, saying, relationally, right? If you don't want to be friends anymore after this, I understand. Right? Or maybe if you apologize to your boss and they fire you, it's not complaining about it. And so it's accepting the consequences of this and saying, I understand, I still want to honor you and acknowledge this. And if you would like me to, if you would like to fire me, I accept that. If you'd like to break up, if you're dating somebody, I accept that. So it's accepting the consequences. Now, I do mean relationship consequences. I'm not saying like if you have a coworker and you accidentally park in their spot, or something like that, and then they get late to a meeting or something and you apologize. It's if they say, I accept your apology, but you have to quit, or you have to give me $1,000, right? That's not what I'm talking about. You're not held hostage to them of like, whatever you tell me I have to do, I have to do. I'm talking about relationally, is because of this, I would like to, we were good friends, now we're just acquaintances again, but we're on friendly terms. But I don't want that level of friendship again. Or, I used to trust you this much, and thanks for the apology, but now I trust you this much. And I'm willing to rebuild that over time, but we're not going back to normal just yet. It's accepting that and not complaining about that. So, number 10, we're getting close to the end here. Number 10 is be patient and gracious, right? So even if you apologize perfectly, it does not mean that they will react perfectly. Again, and this could be hours of topic of all the different ways people can react poorly to an apology. They might use it as an opportunity to beat you up, argumentatively. I'm not talking physically. They might use it as a chance to start the argument again. They might even say, oh, you're trying to be the bigger person? Typical. You always think you're the bigger person. And they might just get re-offended at you even more. There's so many different ways people can handle an apology poorly. And so what I'm saying is, though, be understanding that within a certain limit, right, if you apologize, they may not be ready for it yet. They may not be ready. They may not have forgiven you yet. They may have forgiven you but not be ready for an apology or for the relationship. And so don't just get offended and say, I apologized perfectly. How dare you not respond well? No, be patient and gracious because, again, you're the person who caused this, or at least part of this. So if they don't handle it well, be gracious to them. If they vent a little bit, if they lash out, if they get upset, if they don't handle it, if they walk off, if they reject your apology and storm off, right? Again, you're focused on your mission. I'm here to apologize well, not to make sure that you respond well. Now, on a side note, I'm not talking about abusive behavior. So again, and I only mention this because I've seen things like this, where people, oh, you apologize? I'm going to verbally assault you now. I'm going to use this to just beat you up and condemn you and just trash you. And I'm not saying you have to just take that. Or maybe, other things, just kind of lash out. Here's my temper, and you just have to sit there and take it. I'm just going to scream at you. That's not what I'm talking about. Just because you're apologizing doesn't mean that there aren't boundaries. Or it's like, no, I'm apologizing, but I'm not going to give you an opportunity just to abuse me. One scripture that I think is really important in this is Matthew 18, verse 15. Matthew 18:15. And this is where Jesus says, moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. Right? So this is huge because he's saying, this is more about how to receive an apology. If they sin against you, go tell them. And then if things are restored, fantastic, you save the relationship. But some people take this as anytime anybody's ever done anything against you, you must one-on-one confront that. But that's not what this is saying. He says, if your brother sins against you. And so that's showing a level of relationship there, right? Somebody that you're close with. If somebody you're close with sins against you, go one-on-one first and try to restore the relationship first. And then if they don't receive it, then bring in more people, things like that. You can go on in the passage. But that's talking about if your brother sins against you, right? Again, what if there's a young woman being harassed by a huge man? And you say, well, you need to talk to him one-on-one. Right? That's not what this is talking about. If you don't feel safe in a situation, if you don't know them very well, if you're scared of somebody, that's not a brotherly relationship. This is talking about a close relationship where you go and try and restore the relationship. If there's no relationship there, then you're not obligated to go confront them one-on-one. And again, some people take this to the extreme where it's kind of, no one will intervene, no one will help you out until you've done this one-on-one. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about a close relationship with somebody that you have a brotherly relationship with or sisterly relationship with or something like that. So my point is, if you don't feel safe or you don't feel comfortable confronting somebody, and this can be true whether you're receiving an apology or you're restoring a relationship or you're the one apologizing, bring someone along with you, or in some cases have someone else help you, have someone else do it along with you. And so again, that scripture is not saying you must confront people, right? Again, if somebody robs your house and it's like, well, I'm offended that you robbed my house. And somebody says, well, go tell him one-on-one. That's ridiculous. That's not what this is saying. This is not saying that that's always the first step in every situation. So again, if you think that a situation could get very volatile and you still want to apologize, then I'd say bring other people along, do it in a safe setting, have a mediator, whatever it may be, or do it in a long distance way, right, through a letter or something like that. So again, it's still good to have boundaries. There's so many other topics, right? I'm already out of time, so I got to wrap up. So I can't go into this much more. So my final point, my very quick final point, and this, so number 11, is stay focused. When you're apologizing, stay focused, right? Don't let the apology, this is kind of summing up things I've already said, but don't let the apology turn into another argument, right? Don't take, again, you're trying to apologize, they accuse you of something, and then you start fighting again. Or you start to apologize, you get upset they didn't apologize back. Or they apologize, and you feel like they only apologized for part of what they did. Or you apologize, and they start to say, well, what about that and that and that? Why aren't you apologizing for those things? There's so many ways that an apology can turn into another argument, but you can just avoid all that. Just stay on target. I understand. I'm not prepared to talk about all that right now. We can talk about that later if you'd like to. Right now, I just want to stay focused. I'm apologizing for this. Just try to redirect, deflect. Don't take the bait of different things. If they don't accept, you still apologize, right? You don't have to keep apologizing until they accept. You focus on, I'm here to apologize. Whether or not you accept is up to you. That's your call. I'm giving you the freedom to make the choice of where you want our relationship to be going forward. It's part of the apology, but I'm apologizing for this. If you need time, if you never want to talk to me again, that's your call. Stay focused on your apology. If they do accept, stop while you're ahead, right? Don't get caught up. And if you say, I apologize for this, and they're like, thank you, apology accepted. And then you say, like, oh man, thank goodness, because I thought you were being ridiculous. And just stop, right? Just let the apology sit there, right? Just let it finish. And then don't mess it up. Don't kind of re-dig it up and start analyzing, be like, yeah, in that one part I said, this, and I wasn't sure how you'd react about that. And I know how volatile you are, so I wasn't sure if you'd get angry when I said this part, right? Don't start doing all that. Quit while you're ahead. You finished your apology, move on. Okay, awesome. Let's talk again in a little while, or let's move on, all right? There needs to be some kind of clear transition. And so you want to stay focused in your apology. And so, again, this is very practical, and there's a lot more we probably could have covered. The heart behind it really is to do what's best for, it's putting the other person first and saying, I'm humbling myself, I'm apologizing. Again, like I said, even if they're 99% in the wrong, but there's one thing that you did wrong, you can apologize for that. right? There's almost never a situation where there's nothing you can apologize for. And don't worry about if they're apologizing back to you. I mean, unless you're their parent, and then you need to coach them on how to apologize. So I hope that's helpful. Again, I know there's a lot in there. Very quickly, I'm going to review the points, and then we'll wrap up. So again, the first one is figure out, is an apology even needed? Will it bless them to apologize? Maybe you should just leave it alone. Be sincere, right? Apologize for what you should have done differently. Again, don't apologize for what they did wrong. Don't all that. Don't apologize for what someone else did wrong. Apologize for what you should have done differently. Don't throw other people under the bus. Be specific. Don't just say, I apologize for everything, right? That's not sincere. If it's sincere, you'll think through, and what should I have done differently? Number 6 was don't mention what they did wrong. Leave it alone. They might have done a lot wrong. Now's not the time to mention it. Don't make excuses is number 7. Now's not the time to explain that. Acknowledge the negative impact that what you did had on them, right? So you want to show that you're listening and that you truly are taking this seriously. Number 9, make it right as much as possible. Number 10 is be patient and gracious. Just because you apologize well doesn't mean that they receive it well. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that it's a while before you have to use this, but I imagine you'll have an opportunity to use this sometime in the near future. Have a blessed rest of your day, and I hope to see you again in the fall. Have a good one.